Imagine being a high school student working part-time at a yogurt shop, going into work one day with your best friend, and neither of you ever making it home. On December 6, 1991, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas puts on her uniform and heads to work at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt in Austin, Texas. She's working with her friend Jennifer Harbison. On that night, it was just the two of them working, and the shop closed at 11 p.m., so they were fairly optimistic that it was going to be a breeze, especially because 15-year-old Sarah Harbison, Jennifer's little sister, and her friend, 13-year-old Amy Myers, stopped by after the mall to hang out and help the girls close up faster so they could catch a ride home after. Amy and Sarah stayed in the back doing dishes and hanging out as they weren't technically employees, while Eliza and Jennifer stayed in the front. The girls started cleaning up early while Eliza checked out last-minute customers at her register. A woman comes into the shop to pick up some froyo on her way home for her husband and stops abruptly when she notices two other customers in the shop sitting at a table, facing each other. These two men weren't eating anything, but they were focused on a sack between them. One of them has his hand in the sack and is rolling around something inside of it. She almost asked the girls if they were okay with these guys, but they seemed fine as they were joking around and talking to each other, so she convinces herself that it's all good and leaves. Another couple comes in right before closing and also notices the two guys with the sack sitting at the booth closest to the register. They sit down and eat, and the woman starts eavesdropping on Eliza and Jennifer's conversation. That's when she notices that the two men seem to also be eavesdropping. Around 10:47 p.m., the couple leaves and the two men stay. At 10:50, per store policy, the girls were supposed to lock the door from the inside so no new customers could walk in while they finished up closing tasks. At this point, all the chairs are up on the booths except for one. No one knows exactly what happened in those next 13 minutes, but at 11:03 p.m., Eliza's register marks a no-charge sale, which opened the cash register drawer. Around $500 in cash was taken, but that wouldn't be the only thing that would be taken that night. Around an hour later, a police officer notices smoke coming from the shopping center where the yogurt shop is located. When the fire department gets there, they see the whole establishment up in flames. Initially, they think a stove was left on and a fire started, but there were no stoves in the yogurt shop. When firefighters went in, they had no idea what they were walking into or that it was a crime scene. If they had known, they might have been able to preserve more evidence, and admittedly, they would have done things differently. As they move through the store, fighting off the flames and barely being able to see, they notice something. A foot. Charred black. Then they see a second body, and a third, and then a fourth. They immediately knew something was wrong when they see all four girls' bodies nude, stacked, and bound. A detective named John Jones is immediately called to the scene. When he arrives, he's shocked to see the girls' bodies had been burned so badly that they had melted and become part of the floor that they were laid on. They were all found in the back of the store, except for the youngest of the girls, Amy, who was towards the front of the store and the least burned. She was what gave detectives the first indication that assault had happened, as there was an ice cream scoop pointed up towards her pelvic bone. Before the girls could be transported for autopsies, assault kits were performed on them on the scene, which usually is against protocol, but the detectives in charge were adamant on breaking the protocol and didn't want to lose or contaminate any evidence during the transport. However, there was a lot that wasn't done correctly with this case, and what was found when the autopsies were done on the girls' bodies was shocking and gruesome.
Am I wrong for not giving up the house that I inherited? I, 29 female, was raised in a Christian household. With that came gender roles that were ingrained in me at a young age. My granddad, however, hated that my parents taught us this way, and as I got older, I did too. Because of this, I became very close with my grandparents instead of my own parents. I also have an older brother that my parents labeled the second king of the house. More info, my grandparents lived in a beautiful house that had no neighbors, many trees, and a garden. They paid off the house after years and was very special to them. My granddad also had problems with his back and a condition that would get worse until he couldn't go on anymore. After my grandmother passed, he got worse and ended up needing at-home care. He didn't want a stranger in his home, so that wasn't an option. My parents preached that it was punishment for all of his sins, so they wouldn't take care of him, and they were planning on putting him in a home. I decided to stay with him since it would just be easier. My job can be worked effectively at home, and he'd get care from someone who isn't a total stranger. In the time I took care of him, we filled the home with the love and laughter my grandmother brought to it. As my granddad got worse, not a single call, not from my mom or dad or my brother. We were joking about it once, and he said, maybe I should just give you Missy, the house's name, instead of your dad. He's just gonna give it to your brother anyways. He laughed after he said that, so I assumed he was joking. Fast forward, the worst happened. I was the one who found him, had to make the call, all of it. As much as I pushed away from my parents, I didn't want them to find out the news from a random person. The funeral was the first time I ever truly connected with my parents in years. We hugged and cried together, and we were all vulnerable. But then it came time for the will. Now, it wasn't some telenovela with all the dramatics, but it was intense. The house that was supposed to be my dad's became mine, as well as many other things that my dad planned on giving to my brother. I was accused of manipulating my granddad into giving it to me, and my brother was just yelling. A week after, my brother came to the house in tears. He was begging me to give him the house since his was too small for his wife and baby. He argued that because it's just me and my husband and we don't want kids, I don't need it. I told him to leave and felt horrible. I felt like an asshole, and so does my family. He's right, I don't need the house. house. My job pays me good money and I could easily just live somewhere else. On the other hand though, my granddad wouldn't want him or my dad to have him. I am at a loss here. Am I the asshole?
Am I in the wrong for grounding my daughter for ruining our vacation? My husband, daughter 15, stepkids 13 and 16, and I just came back from a 2-week vacation. My daughter is very smart and is very good at a lot of things. She's also very competitive. My husband is also very competitive. My daughter started off this vacation by telling my husband that there was Sudoku on the plane and explaining how to play. He didn't know that she's been playing Sudoku for months. She made a bet with him that if she finishes the hardest level first, he'd buy her Wi-Fi for the flight, and if he finished first, she'd share a bed with his younger daughter on the trip. His younger daughter was complaining about sharing with his oldest because she kicks and sleeps in the middle of the bed. She beat him and pestered him until he bought the Wi-Fi. When we got there, she challenged him to races on land and in the pool. She's won medals at state track meets and has been swimming since she was 2. Every day she challenged him to something, win, and then he'd have to buy her something from the resort or local shops. My husband was getting sick of losing and my stepdaughters were upset that their dad was buying her stuff and not them, so I told my daughter she either couldn't compete with her stepdad or she had to let him win. She decided to tell her stepdad that she wasn't allowed to compete with him anymore because he couldn't handle losing. This made them start to argue, so I told her that if she kept it up, she'd be grounded to the resort for the rest of the trip. A little over a week at this point. She decided to test me, so I stuck to my word, and she was left at the resort while the rest of us went out every day. The vacation was much more enjoyable without her turning everything into a competition, but she told her dad when she got back that she was grounded, and he's mad at me now for leaving her there and excluding her from the vacation because my husband couldn't act like an adult. I told him my daughter was warned to stop, but she decided to test me, and now he's forcing her to stick to the custody schedule. Technically, I have her every other weekend, but he was letting her go back and forth whenever she wanted, and is now threatening to go to court for child support and back pay. So, am I in the wrong for grounding her for ruining the vacation? Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, The Yogurt Shop Murders. In December 1991, when the bodies of 4 young teen girls were found bound, gagged, and stacked in a yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, there was a lot of pressure on everyone investigating on what happened. At this time, Austin was a small town without much major crime. The crime scene tech at the time didn't have much experience with arson. The bathroom was dusted for fingerprints, a lot of items weren't saved that were found in the back with the girls, and many people weren't wearing booties walking around on the crime scene. Would any of this help in finding their killers? Maybe, maybe not, but we'll never know for sure. The medical examiner determined that some of the girls had been assaulted, but their bodies were burned so badly that they couldn't determine if it had happened to all of them. They had all also been shot with the .22 in the head except for Amy, the youngest, only 13, and the least burned body. She, unlike the other girls, had been shot twice. Once on the side of the head, but when that didn't kill her, a second larger caliber weapon was used to shoot her again. She also had a bruise under her chin indicating that she had been struck, and she had also been strangled before her life was ended. They can't tell if she was singled out for some reason or if all the girls were tortured this way before their death as their bodies were burned so badly. A lot of the crime scene details weren't released in the earlier days. However, the facts were slowly leaked. Surprisingly, there were over 300 suspects and people who came forward to confess to this crime, but none of them turned out to be legit. A week after the crime, a young boy named Maurice Pierce is arrested for possession of a .22, the same type of weapon that was used in the crime. He points his finger at his friend Forrest Welburn, stating that he was the one who committed the crime after borrowing the weapon from him that night of the murders. However, Welburn stated that him, Pierce, and 2 other boys, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, weren't even in town that night. Pierce's statements also didn't correlate with anything that happened that night of the murder, so they were let go. Weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. By 1999, 3 of the 4 boys had confessed to the yogurt shop murders, but there was never any physical evidence or witnesses that tied them to the scene. It turns out that there was a lot of coercion and falsified statements from detectives against these men, and their charges were dropped after DNA testing proved none of them were there. The people who had seen the 2 men in the yogurt shop that night stated that they looked like they didn't belong there or in that area. A partial DNA profile was found, but it only had 16 markers, meaning it could belong to thousands of men. It's enough to eliminate potential suspects but not identify one. In 2017, detectives submitted the sample into a database that matched an unidentified individual whose corresponding sample was provided by the FBI. But that individual's identity was never revealed and no arrests have been made. In 2022, Congressman Michael McCall cited the yogurt shop murders when introducing the Homicide Victims Family Rights Act, a bill that allows for federal review and renewed investigation of cases that have gone cold for at least 3 years. It's been over 30 years. This case is still cold, but hopefully one day, justice will be served. I want to kick out my brother and his family after they've been horrible house guests. My brother, Ellis, recently got a job in my city that required an immediate start. He didn't have the time or money to find a place on such short notice, and his partner, Taylor, just had a baby 7 months ago, so he didn't want to leave her alone. So he asked if he could stay at my place for a couple months to get situated. Ellis is a responsible guy who doesn't take advantage of people, so I felt okay saying yes. Ellis, Taylor, their 7-month-old baby, and Taylor's daughter all moved in. Before they came, I made it clear that I would not tolerate them doing any sleep training or cry it out stuff with the baby. If the baby cries, you need to make an immediate and reasonable effort to soothe him. The other rule was that Taylor was responsible for any damage her daughter did to the house. You would think this would be obvious, but we've had previous incidents. The final rule was neither I nor my husband would be doing any childcare. I'm a stay-at-home mom to my own daughter, as well as having a side business. And my husband works very hard. Just because we're at home does not mean we're available to provide childcare. I thought it went without saying, and they said they would be responsible for themselves in all other ways. They accepted all of the conditions and moved in. It took 2 weeks to go to shit. There were times I'd have to get up in the night to wake up Taylor and Ellis to get the baby. Taylor's daughter also has not adjusted well to the move and is constantly playing sick to avoid going to school. Then, because she's not really sick, she spends the day causing havoc. Taylor has been bugging me to help her with the kids despite agreeing that she wouldn't. She's also been expecting that she and the kids would be cooked and cleaned for her. So it was 2 weeks until I was getting annoyed and a further 2 weeks of me being on edge. What tipped it over was earlier this week. I was picking my daughter up early from school and going out, and Taylor asked me to take her daughter with me. She said she was drowning in things to do and the baby was fussing and she needed a break. I said no, Taylor swore at me, and I just left. When we got back a few hours later, the first thing I hear is the baby crying. I go into the nursery, no Taylor. Her daughter is sitting on the couch watching TV and crying, no Taylor. My kitchen is a mess. No Taylor. I frantically searched the whole house to find Taylor locked in the closet. She said that she couldn't take it and needed a break. I call Ellis and tell him to get his ass home. I sat them down and said that they had to go. I said I would chip in for a hotel, but I can't do this anymore. Ellis thinks that I'm being an a-hole and going back on the deal, but he and Taylor haven't held up their end. I do feel bad because I don't want to stress Ellis out with his new job, but I'm going crazy. I hate being in my own home. Am I in the wrong for putting my foot down? Am I in the wrong for disowning my wife's daughter after she chose her mom's affair partner over me? I, 35 male, met my now soon-to-be ex-wife, 33 female, during uni 12 years ago. She already had a kid when she was 19, but the dad left as soon as she started uni. We were dating for 3 months before I met her daughter, Lisa. I remember seeing her family for the first time. I was nervous meeting her parents, but when I saw the little girl beside her mom, I was confused. I asked her if it was her little sister or a cousin of hers, and her answer shocked me. When she told me that that's her daughter, I thought I misheard her or something. At first, I wanted to dump her for hiding something so crucial from me, but she kept on begging me to stay, and eventually, I relented, and soon enough, I started to fall in love with her daughter and wanted to be her father figure. Our bond grew over the years, and in early 2019, before the pandemic hit, we got married. In late 2021, I adopted Lisa, and in early 2022, my wife gave birth to our son, Mark. After my son was born, my wife made a choice to stay at home for the time being, and I was completely fine with that. Everything was going perfectly until a few months ago. I started noticing my wife increasingly spending time with her friends. At the time, I didn't say anything since, in my mind, being at home all day was probably eating at her, and I didn't want to seem controlling. The thing that made me suspicious was her constant texting and going out of the room for calls. She never did that for anyone besides this one friend of hers. I asked her about it, but she gave me some vague answers about gossip. The moment that it went too far, though, was when I came home last week and saw her outside talking on the phone. This wasn't out of the ordinary. I remember seeing my son on the floor crying alone. I was pissed at my wife for just leaving him alone in the house, but when I went to pick him up and smelled the horrible stench coming from him, I was beyond furious. His diaper seemed like it hadn't been changed since the morning. I quickly changed his diaper and rushed outside with him in my arms. I was beyond pissed. I snatched her phone from her hand and I bolted back inside. I locked my wife outside to have a talk with this friend of hers alone. I had my suspicions about who it really was, and when I heard a male voice calling out her name and asking who was there, I immediately knew what was going on. He ended the call as soon as he heard my voice. I then proceeded to lock the front door to make sure that my wife couldn't enter the house at all, and proceeded to screenshot as much of their chat as I could and then send them to myself before deleting them off of her phone. About 5 minutes later, she was still banging on the glass door leading to the backyard. I reluctantly opened it and was met with a smack in the face. Remember, all this is happening while I'm holding a toddler in my arms. As soon as she realized what she had just done, she apologized profusely, started crying, and tried to hug me. I pushed her away and told her to meet me at the dining table. I told my daughter to quickly take care of the baby so me and her mom could have a quick chat. I told her that this was her only chance to even have a sliver of a chance of getting me back. If she messed up this talk, it was over on the spot. No lies, nothing. She kept on trying to apologize and say it wasn't serious. I reminded her that she not only effed me over, she could have easily done serious harm to our son by leaving him alone in the house like that. I then simply asked who, for how long, and did they sleep together? She replied her ex-boss Daniel, 6 months, and she didn't answer the last one, so I kept reminding her that this was her last chance. She then simply nodded. I then asked her if they used protection. To this, she started crying and started begging me for forgiveness. She said that she would block him then and there, would never contact him again, and I could sleep with any woman that I wanted from now, yada yada. I guess Lisa heard the commotion and came downstairs. I told her to go back up, but she just walked to my wife, and I asked her if she knew about Daniel. Up to this point, I was calm. But upon hearing this, I swear I even started to tear up. I asked her why she didn't tell me. She responded with, because unlike you, Daniel buys me things that I want without having to beg. I then asked her how she could possibly do this to her dad. She responded with the, "You're not my real dad" crap. My wife screamed at her upon hearing what she said. At that point, I couldn't bear any of this anymore. I just grabbed my son and got into the car. Me and my son are currently staying at my parents' house. I've basically been drinking myself to sleep every day. Thanks to the saint of a mother I have, my son is being taken care of right now. I'm beyond hurt. I've canceled my ex-daughter's private school tuitions, all her extracurricular activities, and I've contacted a divorce lawyer. He's going to serve my wife this Friday. My wife and Lisa have been blowing up my phone nonstop with apologies. I simply responded with, "Get a lawyer and tell that ungrateful thing of yours to start calling Daniel her dad." I'm disowning her. I then blocked my wife. I didn't respond to Lisa, I just simply blocked her. I guess my wife told our friends what her and Lisa did, and now they've been texting me nonstop. They understand how I feel, but believe that I'm going too far by divorcing my wife without hearing her out. They also keep telling me that disowning Lisa is definitely going too far, and she's only a kid and didn't understand what she was doing. I just can't get over the things that she told me. I worked my ass off to give my wife and daughter luxuries. Luxuries I could have only dreamed of as a kid, and this is how I get paid back? Lisa, 13 years old, is old enough to understand that hiding her mom's affair is bad, and definitely purposely use those words to hurt me. But a part of me believes that there is still hope. A few family counseling sessions later, and we go back to living the life that I once considered a fairy tale. I'm beyond destroyed by this whole situation. A part of me just wants to see them burn in hell, but the other part of me believes there is still hope. Am I really going too far? Is there still hope? Am I in the wrong for telling my son's girlfriend to break up with him? I'm 41 female and my son, male 20, has been in a relationship with his girlfriend, Lily, female 20, for about 3 years now. I love my son and I hate to say this, but he's not turned out to be a good person. He has very little work ethic, has no desire to get a job or go to college, and spends most of his time gaming or partying. Lily, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. She's very studious, has aspirations to be a doctor, is a very good swimmer, and is currently away at college. When my son and Lily first got together in high school, they were an excellent match. We loved having Lily over, and my son definitely took more care of himself. Since then, it's rapidly deteriorated. I know my son still loves Lily, but he never gives her the attention she deserves, and with her clear potential, I just feel she deserves better. When Lily came to visit a few days ago, she was visibly upset. When my son went to the store, I asked her if she was okay, and she told me that she didn't know what to do and wondered why my son had such little ambition and was so lazy. I told her that I didn't see it changing anytime soon, as that's my view given it's been going on for almost 2 years. When she asked what I would do in her situation, I told her to put herself first and what she wanted. Lily thanked me and said that she'd think about things. Well, earlier today, my son comes downstairs in a rage telling me that Lily had broken up with him via text. I asked him what she said, and apparently the message referred to discussions with your mom, and that made her rethink the relationship. My son was livid that I'd gotten involved and said I'd overstepped boundaries. I told him that I didn't advise Lily to leave him, just so that she had to make her own choices and decided what was best for her. My son is now not talking to me, and my husband is annoyed, believing that not having Lily will make my son's rut last even longer. I also miss having Lily around, so am I in the wrong?